This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I talk with New York-based musician, singer, and songwriter Rene Lopez, and we talk about the importance of licensing for musicians today, the power of Spotify playlists, and touring and its challenges. Enjoy this episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have on the show Rene Lopez. And Rene is a New York-based musician, singer, and songwriter. As the son of a salsa trumpeter, he was raised in a home where music was all around him. In fact, the young Rene learned how to play drums before he could even read. But although he grew up surrounded by salsa, disco, and funk, it was rock, R&B, and soul that he gravitated towards. His latest project is the Jam of the Month Club, and we're going to learn all about that on this episode. So first of all, welcome to the show, Rene.
Thank you very much.
Share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Well, at the moment, I'm focusing on a project that I have called the Jam of the Month Club, where every month I release a brand new song. And I've been putting it out on all the digital platforms like Spotify and Apple Music and Tidal and YouTube. But it's been a great experience. I started doing it in September. And it's been so much fun because every month I get to put something out that's brand new, new cover. It's kind of been in the funk genre of music, which has been great because that's what I started off doing in the early 90s with my first group called The Authority. We were a straight up funk band, a New York funk band that had some elements of Latin music and R&B and rap. But this has been one of my favorite projects I've been doing because it's been... the year before, I released 2 albums in 1 year. I released an album called Paint the Moon Gold, and then I released an EP, a 7-song EP called Love Has No Mercy. And I put them both out on vinyl, too, which was awesome for me. I loved it, but it was really hard, as you probably have talked to other artists about this, it was really difficult to reach a big crowd, and I think I might have put out too much music in 1 year, but I couldn't help it. And it was a little frustrating, because I do everything independently. I do everything on my own. I felt like I was wearing so many hats at once, playing shows and putting out music where I got a little burnt out. And I said, wait, what's a different way I can approach this where I can get people's attention and people will actually listen to the songs? Because, as you know, people's attention span today is a little shorter than it used to be because we're just listening to a song at a time or everyone's just on their phone listening to music. So this has been great.
And so I would imagine, like with those album or the EP projects as well, the long gestation periods, very intense. Because you've got not just the writing, then you've got the recording and the mixing and the mastering, and then the marketing and then the pressing and distribution and everything else. It sounds like with this Jam of the Month Club, you can just what do I want to make this month? You don't necessarily have to have a theme around it like you have on an EP or an album. You can just say like, what am I inspired to make?
Exactly. And, I'll start in the beginning of the month with, okay, I've recorded a couple of songs and then I'll change my mind and I'll say, oh, wait, I want to record this song. And then I'll focus in on a different song. And it's been nice to kind of concentrate on one song and say, okay, I'm really going to spend time mixing this song properly and mastering the song properly. Because even with my EPs and with the other albums, it's not like I'm spending months making the record because we don't have the finances to stay in the studio for months. So I'll go in, and the EP I recorded in 2 days.
But it's all the other stuff. It's the getting the distribution, the artwork, the marketing.
Exactly. And this has been great. I have a whole great team of people that I work with. I have a great graphic designer who I've been working with for 7 years, and I'll make like a little board for him, like an art board. It's like, oh, this direction I want to bring the cover of this for this song, and he'll have it to me in like a couple of days. So we work at a really fast pace.
So it sounds like a little bit like I had Amanda Palmer on the show, and she was talking about her Patreon, where now she puts things out every month, but she doesn't have to feel that she has to be a big album project. And she was saying that she actually feels that the album as a as a way of putting out stuff, it's kind of reached the end of the road for that format, and she's just kind of going. She just wants to do it, as inspiration takes her.
I'm gonna have to agree with her 100%. Yeah. Hey, listen, this is where it's going. Either we could fight against it, and I could become bitter, and then I won't write music anymore, or say, okay, well, this is the way people listen to music, and I'm still inspired, and I still feel extremely creative. And I want to put out music. So if this is the way that works, then it works like this. Hey, will I miss putting out a full album? Yeah, because that's how I grew up. I grew up listening to full albums. But I'm fine with this. I'm fine with every month putting out something brand new. It's a lot of fun, I have to say.
So let's take you back. I mentioned that your I think it was your father was a salsa trumpeter.
Yes.
So you grew up around all this stuff as well. Did you go straight from school into doing music full time, or what was the journey look like for you?
Well, it went like this. When I was a drummer, and in high school, I decided that I wanted to be a jazz drummer. But at that time, I was also really into Prince, and I was into Led Zeppelin, and I kind of rebelled against my father's music. My father was a trumpet player, and he played with Ray Barretto, was one of the main groups he played with, and he played on many Ray Barretto records. And then he played with a group that was formed from Ray Barretto's group called Tipica 73. And so when I was a kid, I grew up going to these clubs and watching my dad on stage. But then I found rock and roll, and I found soul and funk, and I kind of gravitated towards that. And I got accepted to the New School of Jazz and Contemporary Music. So I said, okay, I'm going to give this a go, and I'm going to study bebop. And it was great until I decided there was this drummer, you guys will know who he is, Bernard Purdie.
Yeah,
Bernard Purdie.
The Purdie Shuffle.
Yeah, the Purdie Shuffle, of course. So he was my drum teacher, which I was extremely fortunate, because then he basically taught me what a groove really is. And he had a little contest, and he had a rhythm class. And he had a contest. Whoever wrote the two best songs, he would take the songs into a very famous studio at the time called the Record Plant. Zeppelin recorded there. I mean, so many major groups recorded there at the time. And so he picked my songs, right? And I never wrote songs before. I decided I'm going to write songs. So I wrote songs basically in the format like Prince wrote songs, right? So I wrote these songs, and we went into the studio and recorded both songs. And then that just got my juices flowing. I was like, man, I want to start a group. And at the time, I went to school with guys like John Popper from Blues Traveler, and then friends from Spin Doctors. We were all in the same class together. And John already had Blues Traveler, and Eric and Aaron and Chris started the Spin Doctors, so they started playing gigs already around the city. We were all like 18, 19 years old. And then I started my group. I was like, well, damn, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it too. And I started the Authority, and we were this 6-piece band. It was a really, really hot band. But I was a terrible singer, I have to say. I was a really bad singer. I just had a lot of balls to go on stage, and I was a really good front man. And then in time, I started to learn how to sing. Then I started the Authority. And once I started the Authority, we started to get pretty popular within a year and a half. And we started touring around in a van, and I quit school, and I just started doing that full time.
And so when you mentioned that, I think it's actually the drummer in Spin Doctors has his own podcast as well, which I think I've heard a couple of episodes with, which are great. And
oh, good! I didn't even know that. I mean, he's a good friend of mine. Still, I didn't even know he had a podcast.
And the New School obviously has an amazing reputation. I know a friend of mine, John Patitucci, the bass player, is one of the teachers, or has been one of the teachers there as well. So how did that feel? And I'm interested also, like your parents, what did they make? So you kind of, a lot of parents, they aspire for their kids to go to college, but then I'm guessing your folks, because they came from music, that was like it wasn't as big a deal.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, my mother was always worried. My mother worries all the time to this day. She doesn't think I could still take care of myself, but she would always worry. She wanted me to have something to fall back on, as a good mother should. But they knew there was no stopping me. My dad was very, very proud and excited that I chose music, and so there was never a problem. They were always 1,000% behind me. I remember there was a point where my dad put down his horn and he stopped playing music, which was, it was like, wow, I can't believe you stopped playing music. But what happened? He started working another job, and during the day I would practice, and not once would they ever tell me to stop practicing, even if he was sleeping, which, you know, it was incredible. You know, they just were always behind me as a drummer, and when I decided that I was going to start singing and everything I've ever done.
Because I've also heard from some children of musicians when they've said, I actually want to go to music college, whether it's to Berkeley or wherever the place is, and
Right.
their parents have actually put them off the idea, and they've said, actually, we don't think you should go to music college. I actually think you should just get down the road and do it like I had to do it the hard way before there was...
Well, I'll tell you one thing. That's what all the teachers at the new school would say to us. They would constantly say, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing in the classroom? You should be playing gigs.
And,
why are you spending your money on books?
And I suppose it is the dirty little secret of the good music colleges anyway, that most of their top students actually never complete their degrees.
That is true. Hey, listen, I knew I would never become a teacher. I would be a terrible teacher, so that wasn't going to happen. I mean, a lot of great musicians went to the new school, and we were part of the guinea pig crew because we were the first year. We were the first in 1987. You know, we were the first batch of students there. I don't even know how many, but maybe there was like 50 of us.
And you're talking about the Jam of the Month Club. So where do your ideas come from? To, let's say, you start of the month. Where are the ideas coming from that you decide to use on them? How do you kind of capture these ideas if they're coming? If they're at different places, do you have ways of like finding some way to kind of capture and work up those ideas?
Okay, well, I mean, honestly, I write all the time. I'm always writing, whether it's just I have my phone on me and I'm singing melody ideas into my phone, and then or I just have, you know, some paper on me. I don't stop creating. It's just something that I do. And so I have my own studio, which I'm very blessed that I have my own studio in Williamsburg. And I'm pretty organized about it now because, you know, I have 2 kids. And honestly, I wake up every morning at 6 a.m. I get them ready for school. I drop them off to school. I go work out, and then I go straight to my studio and I lock the door and I write. And, you know, I just have my Pro Tool rig there, and I have, you know, a lot of gear. And I have a friend of mine who comes in engineers like twice a week. When I'm ready to record, I just record.
And how has your creative process changed from what you're doing now compared to, you mentioned right at the start when you were working on those very first things for Bernard Purdie, and you were kind of inspired by Prince. How is your creative process different now compared to what it was?
Way, way, way more prolific right now. And I have a lot more going on in my head musically, so I have a lot to dip into. You know, that's been a blessing and a curse for me where, you know, some bands or songwriters, they stick to one genre, and that's what they stick to. With me, I kind of jump around, you know, from album to album. It could be influenced by Brazilian music or funk or Latin soul, rock and roll. And so, you know, and that's what I loved about Prince too, because Prince was the same way, you know. I mean, on one album, you know, if we were talking about Sign of the Times, he would have a great pop song, a great funk song, something that had an extended jam. You know, he would just cover all grounds. So I feel because of that, because of how I was brought up, my father's great record collection, and listening to all the music that he had from, you know, fusion, and he was a huge Miles fan, and I just had all this great Latin music. It's just always constantly buzzing around in my head. So I always have something to dip into.
And do you think that the sticking in one particular genre is less needed now? Now we think about Spotify, where you almost don't. Like we used to go into a record store where you would go into the jazz section, or you would go into the pop section or the funk section, and it was like physical demarcations of those places.
Yes.
Where now we're just experiencing all online, so it's very easy to slip between different genres.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you know, people still are going to like what they like. Some people just want to listen to folk music, so they can go on Spotify and there's a folk playlist, you know. Or, you know, some people like pop music and they want to just listen to pop music. I mean, that's what I kind of like about Spotify, that you could just jump around to different types of music, you know, and some artists just want to play folk music or funk music, and that's all they want to do, and that's awesome. For me, I'm never satisfied. I get bored really fast, you know. I'll think, oh man, I'm just gonna, you know, work on boogaloo tracks, and I'm gonna dig deep into boogaloo because that's where I come from, and then I'll do it, and then I'll put something out, my own version of it, and then the next day I'll wake up, oh man, but now I want to do this, whatever it is.
So how does that lead to, especially with the change of the music industry, actually making a living today from your music as well? Because we're obviously seeing massive changes in the industry. So what's your take on how you approach actually making a living from your music?
Well, I mean, I think artists have to really focus on licensing. That's a really important thing right now, is working with someone who's going to get your songs licensed, for commercials or for TV shows or for film, because, obviously I'm not going to make a living on Spotify. I don't have enough people following. I don't have millions and millions of listeners like Rihanna or whoever. But so you have to focus on other ways, like getting your songs licensed and touring. But I'm not touring right now, so
And does it make any difference? Obviously, the ad industry and so much TV industry, in New York, LA, London.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make a difference you being physically in New York, or does it it doesn't really matter?
Oh no, because you could just send whatever they need. It's funny. I learned a lot about that industry because when I first started working with someone, they started sending me the emails that they get from companies. Oh, we want a song with this type of title, in the chorus, or something that says happy in the chorus. So I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know it worked that way. And then I would we need a positive message in the song, or we need a song that's talking about the rain, And I was like, oh, I see how this works. So yeah, you don't have to be, you could, if they're into your songs and they think you can write good songs, then they're going to want to work with you. So you could just send them whatever you have.
And can you tell us about a time when you worked on a music project, gave it your heart and your soul, but for whatever reason it just didn't work out like you hoped? And more importantly, what were the lessons that you took away from that experience?
Oh my gosh. Well, you talking about touring or just being in the studio, or
it could be all of the above, any of these.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, some of the most difficult experiences I've had were touring, for sure, especially in the early days with the Authority, because we would work constantly and we would drive around in a van with 6 musicians, and we had someone who helped us with our gear and our merchandise, and we would just play 6 nights a week. And so after a while you would go crazy, because you're going from club to club, you're bringing in all your equipment, setting up your merchandise. And so there would be some places where you would have, a good crowd, and then some places where there would be like 5 people, and having to deal with that time and time again, it would wear on you. And so, I ran into a lot of that with and I would have to learn lessons like, well, this wasn't promoted right. Well, we didn't get the word out in a certain way, or, so the touring stuff, there was definitely a lot of heartache that happened for me in the early 90s, for sure.
And how do you approach touring today, and how do you think about playing live?
Well, man, I tell you, it's when I play live now, I try to scale it down, because bringing a big band on the road, you're not going to make much money, and you're probably going to lose money. And so I just try to focus on places that I know people are there who want to hear me. Because I've been out of that loop for a little while. The last big tour I did, I went and opened up for this artist named Joseph Arthur. Do you know Joseph at all?
Yeah, that was a European tour.
Yeah, so I did that European tour with Joe, and that was great because I opened for him. And then I played bass with him in his band. And it was a lot of work. We all worked really hard. But it was great because I got to get in front of his crowd, and it was a really positive experience. And I would definitely do that again. For now it's like when I do things, I want to be able to play in front of a good crowd. Because I honestly don't have a huge following. I don't have like a huge following on the road. So I'm trying to figure out how I can make that happen again.
And you mentioned having like people like Bernard Purdie as early advisors and teachers, but what's some of the best advice that you've ever received about music or making a life and a living in music?
Wow. Well, I've had a lot of people tell me, it was a difficult road and maybe I shouldn't do it. Definitely not my parents. My parents are always behind me. I've been very fortunate and very lucky where I was able to find ways to make a living, but when it comes to advice, you know, it was my own strength that got me through. I'm very stubborn, you know, and very I didn't ever want to fail, you know. Music was way too important for me. I didn't want to like live my life being miserable, saying, "Oh man, I have to not play music and have to do something else." So I just was extremely stubborn, you know, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. I remember when my first cassette demo that I made in New York City, and when I had the authority, I borrowed money from someone to make the demo, and I bought my guitar player a guitar because he didn't have a guitar. And we went in the studio, made a demo, and I would go around to the clubs in New York City, like Continental Divide and Nightingales and all these little dive bars. And I wouldn't leave until they played the cassette. They thought I was crazy. Like, oh, well, listen to it. I was like, maybe you should listen to a song right now. And I would just sit at the bar and have a drink until they listened. And then they would listen like, oh, wait, you're pretty good, man. Hey, you want a gig in 2 weeks? Yeah, sure.
And it would go from there.
Yeah, and go from there, you know. You know, man, listen, I just knew I was born to make music, so there's no other way for me. So you just figure it out. You know, it's a hard industry right now, and it's really difficult now. We have a lot more control as independent artists, but there's a lot of noise out there, you know, so it's really hard to break through all the noise.
So one of the ways you're looking to break through the noise is with this latest project, the Jam and the Month Club. How does it work? So you've got guests. Talk us through the process, how people can kind of get into what you're doing with this.
Okay, well, so one of the songs I did have guests. I went down to New Orleans and I went to my friend's studio. My friend Mike Napolitano, he's a great engineer and producer. He used to work for Dan Lanois back when Dan Lanois had Kingsway in New Orleans. And so I went down to New Orleans, and he's married to Ani DeFranco. And so they have this awesome studio in their house. And I went down there, and I had this idea for a song, and I started recording it. I was putting it together by myself, piece by piece, playing drums and guitar. And then I just said, hey, man, is George Porter Jr. around? And he said, oh, let me check. And texted George. And then next thing I knew, George was in the studio. And that was fantastic. And then I asked if Ivan Neville was around because it would be great for him to play B3 and piano. And he happened to be around. And within that day, my song was done, you know, and I had both Ivan and George on the song. I had a horn section come in that I sang the horn lines to piece by piece. And bam, there was the track. And I had to bring it back to mix it in New York City. But that was a great experience. It was like, and it was different from the last song I put out the month before. That was the only song where I had like guests that were sort of well known in the music world, and everything else has been me putting it together. And I've been working with a friend of mine named Ken Rich, who I've worked with for 10 years. He has a great studio in Brooklyn called Grand Street Recording. He's been really great to work with. He's been mixing every single song for me. And I start the tracks off in my studio, which is down the street from him. But my studio isn't really meant for, it's more like a project studio. So, and I'll start off there. And then my old keyboard player, Tony Brito, who was in my group, The Authority, he's been a part of this. He stopped playing music for many years. And I gave him a call, said, hey, man, you still playing keyboards? I would love to have you be a part of what I'm doing now because it's kind of in the genre of what we used to do. And he was like, man, I would love to. So he's been part of every song. And then just different musicians from New York. This song that I'm putting out next week, it's called My Vibration. And I'm playing drums and guitar and some keyboards on it and singing. But then I have a great horn section. My friend Chris Emenizer did a great horn arrangement on it. And Clark Gayton is playing trombone. I don't know if you know who Clark is. He's awesome. He plays in Bruce Springsteen's band. Now he's playing with Wynton Marsalis. This guy Eddie Allen is playing trumpet. A girl by the name of Nikki Richards is singing on it with me, and she just got off tour with Madonna. She used to sing with Michael Jackson. So yeah, I know a lot of musicians in New York City, so it's always very spur of the moment, and I'll see who's around, if they can be a part of what I'm doing, and if they're around, I'll get them in the studio.
And then what was the thinking about the New Orleans? What did that add to it going down there? And because it's an amazing city. I mean, I was there a couple months ago in the music, but
it's one of my favorite cities. So I go to New Orleans a lot, and my friend Mike is one of my favorite people, so I always love to go visit him. And if you hear the song, it's called "Watch Me Turn It Up." It's New Orleans. I don't know how I wrote that song, but when I was there, I wrote the song while I was there, and it's really, you feel and hear the essence of New Orleans in the song. It's New Orleans funk for sure.
It's interesting. I mean, you talk about that in terms of the different places and different studios. There was that I think it was David Byrne that did that talk where he said how the place that you're actually going to be performing the music has a huge influence upon the actual music itself. What music is, so like Mozart, the kind of Mozart stuff sounds like a certain kind of sound because it's supposed to be playing big box rooms, whereas jazz is supposed to be played, if you're a Hammond trio, it's a certain kind of sound. Or if you're in a club, it's a certain kind of sound. Or if you're doing some choral work and you're not going to be playing many up-tempo tunes, or if you go and see Bruce Springsteen, everything's mid-tempo, because anything any more complicated than that's not really going to work when you're 60,000 deep.
That is true. Yeah, there's something, if you spend time in New Orleans and you go out and see music and you eat the food, you get a little bit, some dirt under your fingernails, and you can't just and if you're going to write songs down there, man, it's just going to take over. It's gonna be swampy. It's gonna be a little thick and dirty. At least for me, that's what happens to me when I play down there. And I've actually gone down to make music down there a lot because of that, because I'm affected by the environment.
And I know a lot of musicians now have been kind of going there, and either because they just love the place, or the musicians are there that they particularly want to kind of work with. And there's a lot of great stuff coming out from there.
Yeah.
Do you have any online resources or tools like Evernote anything that you love and you would suggest our listeners check out?
Online tools, like what do you mean by that?
So for example, you're mentioning about singing, recording yourself singing lines so you can remember them. So one of our previous guests recommended an app he has for his iPhone where he sings it and it actually works out the chords based upon what he whistles or sings into it.
Oh, that's so cool. I want to know what that app is. I don't know.
I'll have to put a link to it.
I swear to God, if I could, I would just carry a cassette deck with me, man. I would just carry my little Walkman around with me still. So I just have a little recording app on my phone, just the Pro Recorder app. That's it. That's all I use. It's called Recorder Pro, and I just hum my songs into there. Or if I have my guitar with me, if I'm out in my studio, I'll just record anything onto my phone. And
you mentioned you're a big Pro Tools user as well. Is there any kind of bits of plugins or particular gear that I've been
really using all the universal plugins right now. I think they're the best ones, and because I got the Apollo, because I could travel with it, so I could bring it to, just put it in a bag. So I think anything that the universal plugins are putting out are amazing. I think they're great. So
if you could recommend only one record and one book to our listeners, what would they be?
Oh my gosh. Holy cow. Okay, one album. I mean, gosh, I know I already said it, but Prince is one of my all-time favorites. And it's hard because he's one of my favorite artists, but I can't listen to his new music. It's really difficult because I feel like it's not as good. I don't think he's writing great songs anymore. There's still no one better than Prince live in my book. But I really think Sign of the Times is one of those albums that covers a lot of ground. And to me, it's so musical. He really wrote great songs. I dig the production a lot on that album. So yeah, I would say Sign of the Times would be the album that I would choose. And book, wow, that's crazy. Now, any book, or is it a book about the music industry?
It could be any book. And sometimes if people get stuck on this, I'll say, is there a book that you've recommended or you've gifted more often to people?
Wow. Oh gosh. You know which book I love? The Patti Smith book. Kids. Oh my God, why am I forgetting the name of the book right now?
I think actually one of our previous guests we had on recently also suggested that book as well. So
yeah.
You can't remember the name, but I'll put it on the show notes. People go to jamestaylor.me and just put Rene Lopez. You'll be able to find the name of the book neither of us can remember just now.
Brain cells can't remember Patti Smith's book, but it's something kids.
Yeah.
And I love the book. It was beautiful.
So let's imagine, final question, if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you've got the tools of your trade, your instruments or your kind of studio stuff, and the knowledge you've already acquired, but you know no one and no one knows you. You have no following. How would you restart things?
Wow. Well, I think right now, artists really have to, if they want to get their music out there, first of all, I don't, they don't have to waste their money on the physical product, right? And they have to really focus on writing great songs, like not just like jams, but really good songs with really good melodies, really good hook, really good lyrics, and focus on getting your stuff on strong playlists on Spotify, because that's the future right now. It's not about, you could spend money on trying to get your songs on the radio, but you're not going to have as many listeners, and it's not as powerful as a tool as it used to be. So, I think it's really important that artists focus on getting strong songs out, on hopefully getting them on popular playlists on Spotify. And not going, just taking your time and really taking your time with your craft and making sure the product is great, Because people are just putting out, since we could all put music out now, we could just all go on TuneCore and get our songs on Spotify. There's so many people putting out songs. Like, what's going to make you different from everybody else?
Yeah, I think this no one's cracked the discoverability thing yet.
Right.
It's just I'm amazed that I think a lot of the music I've discovered recently either been through, as you said, Spotify playlists or old school word of mouth. What are you listening to as well? Because it's hard. It's still algorithms are amazing, but they haven't yet cracked the music thing.
Right, you're right. Absolutely.
So final thing here, share the best ways that guests can connect with you and learn all about these different projects, your Jam of the Month Club and everything else you've got going on. Yeah,
so my Jam of the Month Club, they can go on SoundCloud, so Rene Lopez on SoundCloud, and they could download. Once a month, I put up a new song, and they could download it for free. And also on Spotify, it's the new songs come up on Spotify, and then all my songs from the last 10 years are up there too. And then ReneLopez.com is another great way to get in touch with me. Just my website at ReneLopez.com.
Great. And I'll put all the links here. If people go to jamestaylor.me and just type in Rene Lopez, you'll be able to see all the links for this. Rene, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish you all the best with the Jam of the Month Club and all the other projects you're going to have happening. Looking forward to hearing the next jam that's coming out.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.